going on, guys? Welcome back to Before the Whistle. I'm your host, Maddy, and as always, we have our guest episodes coming out on Fridays. I know that I've been doing a couple of opponent previews the last couple of weeks. I did have Mike Detillier on again just to kind of recap the first few weeks of Tulane football. But with Tulane having a bye week after this weekend, plenty of time to kind of break down the post-game analysis of this game. But something else that's really important this weekend is that the 2023 Hall of Fame class for Tulane is getting inducted, with that ceremony taking place, I guess, today on Friday, and being honored either at first quarter or at halftime on the field this Saturday. And it only felt right to bring back one of the people that's getting inducted into that class and has been my mentor in this industry. The reason that I am really kind of here right now talking to you guys in a Cotton Bowl Roll Wave shirt, current voice of the Pelicans, former voice of the Green Wave for all of the years that he is about to go over in correct factual detail when I bring him on, and current inductee into this year's 2023 Hall of Fame class, Todd Graffagnini. I really couldn't be more grateful to have him back on, especially just to be upfront with you guys. This has been a week where I've been a little under the weather, and it really helps when fellow guys that work in the radio industry and have the ability to carry me a little bit through this. I just really enjoyed hearing all the stories about the good, the bad, and the ugly of Tulane football throughout the years. And again, as someone that really saw it all through that time, what last year felt like, how he kind of was able to enjoy that in a way that was so different than being either on the sideline or up in the booth, and just how much we've seen things change. And in terms of fan turnout, in terms of engagement and relevancy, all of that really showing more than ever, I think, in last weekend's turnout against Nicholls State. Again, when those guys from last year talk about leaving a legacy, it's really safe to say that they did that. But Todd Graffagnini has certainly left a legacy of his own, and I'm just really grateful to welcome him on here and be a part of his celebration this Friday. Well, I'm very happy to be joined today by this year's one of the Hall of Fame inductees into the Tulane Football 2023 Hall of Fame class, Todd Graffagnini, the voice of the Green Wave for 27 years, if I'm correct on that one. Todd, how you doing today?
I'm great, Maddy. How are you doing? I'll just, make 27 years I was there, 12 for the full football, basketball, baseball, but baseball for 27. So just want to make it factually correct, if you will.
Have to. So I have to ask, from the day that you walked into Ken Berthelot's radio booth, asking him if you could kind of just shadow him along, did you really ever see this day coming for you?
No. Look, you don't get into the business, if you will, or just you're to think about what's going to happen in the future. It's you're trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life. And at that point, I had an idea. That's what I wanted to do. But to envision that I would have been at Tulane for literally half my life, and to end up, on Friday where it's really all going to hit me, that spending 27 years at a place and then to be honored the way that it's going to go down, it's pretty overwhelming. And look, I've been thinking a lot about it. I mean, I've known this since April, but in the last few days, it's really starting to hit me. And I think it's really just the emotions are really going to start to flow, if you will, on Friday night when I'm actually up on that podium. Because it's crazy, Maddy, because I've been in that room with all the other inductees. I've emceed the event. I've been in the audience in the event. My brother got in last year. My brother Keith was inducted last year. So I have been to many of those Hall of Fame ceremonies, but never in my wildest dreams would I ever imagine I would actually be accepting an induction. So it's heady stuff. It really is.
Definitely a good year too to be accepting the award with everything that's going around with Tulane.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple years ago, you might have mentioned it kind of in passing, but now, I'm always wearing this on the show, but I go to Canseco, someone mentions the t-shirt. I mean, it really is been just something, but if there is anyone that's really seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of Tulane through all those years, It's definitely been you. I will kind of get to your favorite games, but a lot of Tulane fans know there were just a lot of years of bad sports. And how do you kind of approach that as a broadcaster?
It's interesting because, I've thought a lot about my speech and I have written my speech, and I'm going to try to streamline it where, look, a lot of my broadcasting career was gut punch after gut punch after gut punch. I mean, you could ask any of my friends, my family. I mean, I took losses very personally because I wanted Tulane to win. So not only was I trying to convey what was going on in front of me, on the football field, the basketball court, or the baseball diamond, but I was also experiencing the pain of losing. And a lot of those, look, it's funny because, Corey, who you work with now, he's experienced the 2-10 and the 12-2. Now, I experienced the 12-0 when I was on the sideline, just like you. But I experienced many 2-10 seasons. I've experienced 1-win seasons. So, when you were doing sideline, when I was doing sideline back then, when Buddy Tevens was the head coach, and the 1-win years and the 2-win, I'd have to do the locker room as well and go in there and interview whoever was the coach and players. It's a very lonely feeling when you're walking into a locker room where week after week after week, you're just asking the same questions. I used to joke, Maddy, I could have put one interview on tape and then the next week just hit play and it would have been the same exact question. Basically, well, what happened this week? It takes a lot out of you. It really does. But that's what makes being a Tulane fan so great. And I know in your short time where you didn't give a rat's patoot about football, now you do. But I think you've seen that winning means a whole lot more at Tulane than it does any place else, because it's just not easy being a Tulane fan. It just isn't. It never has been. So Tulane fans appreciate winning way more than any other school. And I'll die on that hill. I mean, I will go toe to toe with anyone who tries to debate me on that.
Kind of reminds me of the Lions in the NFL version, or the Browns. You could kind of pick from those two, or if you're looking at this year, the Broncos or the Bears. So really not good for B teams in the NFL.
But again, the Bears have won before. I mean, they've been down for a while, and the Broncos have been winners. At Tulane, it's been 1973, 1979, 1987, 1998. I mean, you can literally, off the top of my head, I can tell you what successful years. Now, in the last few, Willie Fritz has turned that around. You've had some consistency. But prior to Willie Fritz, it was, okay, you had one good year, coach was gone. And you never had any type of consistency. That's why this has been so much more fun for really long-suffering Tulane fans, to have a coach like Willie Fritz who stayed, unlike any other coach who won here. And he's built a program. He's built a culture. That's what he wanted to do when he got to Tulane. And, I was very fortunate to be here when Willie Fritz got here. So I was able to work 3 years with him. We went, got to go to a bowl in 2018. My last football game as a play-by-play announcer at Tulane was the 2018 Cure Bowl, which we won. We beat Ooh La La, if you will, or Southwestern Louisiana, whichever one you want to call. Sorry out there with all the Cajun fans, but no, just to see what coach. I mean, look, I love Willie Fritz. I've said that many, many times. It's not easy to win at Tulane, and he's figured it out. So build a statue now.
Has to be him doing the wave surf at that. But no, I mean, it's a good point where, you think about, like you just said, where, the Bears have won semi recently. I was just talking to my friend yesterday, actually, about the Cincinnati game where they would go to the conference championship last year. They put up a graphic that was something like, the last time Tulane was in this position, we were in the middle of World War II. And it was very harsh, but really went to show you just I think the magnitude of everything that has kind of gone on recently, but you brought something up that I was going to ask you about, of just going into those locker rooms game after game. And I think when people, hear these post-game interviews, especially on the radio, you're not seeing the body language of these guys. You're not seeing those kind of emotions. You're only really hearing them in their voice. But I mean, I'm down there during the games when games haven't gone well, but having to ask guys about kind of what went wrong. How did you really approach that? And as much as you joke about being able to play the same interview over and over again, I think it really is an underrated difficulty to be able to keep these guys engaged and ask them about multiple tough situations.
Well, Angus Lynn was a longtime columnist for the Times-Picayune, and he used to do a Karnak column. I don't know if you're not old enough to remember Karnak. It was a Johnny Carson bit. He'd blow into an envelope. He'd take out the piece of paper, and he read it, and it was an answer to a question. And then, he'd put the piece of paper, and he'd say an answer to the question, and then he would read the question. It was hilarious. It was funny. It was like he was seeing into the future. Well, Angus Lynn did a Karnak column every year, and the answer was Todd Graffagnini's post-game locker room interviews in Tulane football. And the question was, what's the hardest job in America? Like, I was actually in a column.
This is a real story.
This actually happened. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Not awesome, but looking back on it now.
But that's the way it was. I mean, and it just stinks because what those guys are doing each and every week. They're preparing to go and win football games, even though during those really, really rough seasons, you knew they weren't going to win. I mean, they just didn't have the athletes to compete with the teams that we were playing with back then. And the thing about it is, you go into a locker room like that, and sometimes the games were complete blowouts, and sometimes they were very tough losses. But the bottom line is that they weren't winning, and you got a job to do. And the thing about it is, those guys know who you are. I mean, you're around, you go to practice. So it's not like it's a total stranger walking in there, because it's a sacred environment. I mean, you're going into a locker room, especially after a game, where the emotions are really, really raw. And like I said, they know that you have a job to do, but you've got to be respectful as well, because that's their space. And and again, it's funny now, but I was so used to it, Maddy. I mean, I was used to going into those types of locker rooms where they were just, you lose 49-0 to Boston College, and you go in a locker room. It's like, well, what do you say? I mean, but like I said, I had a lot of experience with it, unfortunately. So it got to be pretty easy. I mean, not easy, but you know what I'm saying? I knew how to handle it.
Yeah. I mean, again, we had a very, like you said, it's almost that Corey and myself, I guess you could count my time as a student, but we had the 100 speed version of the entirety of the Tulane experience, from, the 2 and 10 to 12 and 2 bookends. But especially for me, my first year doing broadcasting, I'm someone that doesn't mind really discussing losses, but I found that it was an interesting position to be in versus, covering a team versus being kind of the radio callers in. You can't totally rag on them, but kind of finding that balance between like kind of correct level of criticism, right, while still trying to, was it something that you ever were trying to still kind of instill hope in these fans, or how did you really kind of balance that on the calls and the pregame shows, which to me were just as tough?
No question. Look, I was pretty fortunate, okay, because I got along with pretty much every head coach I ever worked with. And I'll tell you why, because they knew that I gave a, what, because I was there every day. And that's in every sport. And when the coaches know that you care and you're invested, then you get a little more leeway. College is obviously a lot different than being an NBA announcer. Okay. Those guys are paid professionals. Now in college, they're paid now too, but it's a little bit different. Okay. Back then, true student athletes, criticizing student athletes is a little bit frowned upon. I mean, they're students, they're 18 to 22-year-old kids. But you can't always pump sunshine. I mean, look, that was my style. Okay. I got away with it to a certain extent, but I got away with it because the players knew that I gave a crap about them and I was there every day, and the coaches did too. It's the people who start criticizing when they're never there. That's when you get into some major problems. And I've known people who have experienced those problems. I never had those problems because I was there every day. And you're there every day, Maddy, and it makes such a difference when the players know who you are and they trust you and they get it. Okay. If they screw up, they know it. And you got to say what you got to say sometimes. It's, that's just part of the deal. So, but again, I was fortunate that I worked with head coaches that understood that, but they also understood that I cared. And I always would have their best intention because I wanted Tulane to win. So I guess that's how I approached it. But it's a very good point because it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point too about going and seeing practice every day. I think not only does that provide context to, like you said, most of the things happening that people that don't pay attention to these things are critically lacking, but I also think, to your point about them being student athletes, to me, just seeing how much work they put in every single day. It's not like they were just hanging out during the 2-10 season doing absolutely nothing. And I think that too really just kind of allows you to not necessarily look at things more on the positive side, but I think it makes it a little harder to just kind of criticize without, realizing kind of the human element and everything that goes on behind the scenes.
No doubt. No doubt. I mean, look, it's not easy to be a present day student athlete. I mean, you got to go to, some of these workouts, 6 a.m., you're lifting weights, then you're going to practice. I know Tulane practices in the morning, which has really been a staple of Willie Fritz, especially just because you're trying to beat the weather. But I mean, you're up at 6 a.m. and then after you're done all of your football stuff, you got meetings in the morning, then you got practice. And after all that, you got to go to class. I mean, I got a Loyola degree, Maddy. I'm not as smart as you. I didn't graduate from Tulane. But it's hard. It is really, really hard. And it's like, when do these guys ever have any free time? I mean, I guess the reward, I guess the payoff is on Saturdays when you get to actually play the game, because every other day of the week, their lives are mapped out, and to be able to juggle practice and meetings and games and schoolwork, it's not an easy thing to do. So yeah, tons of respect to all those student athletes.
And in the same kind of note of, we're talking about, the critical side of things, but I also think there's just as much to be said about, the positive aspect of things. I just feel like there's been this kind of recent fight, if you will, about covering teams with, and I know that radio is different, but this kind of new age of being a little more emotionally connected to your coverage or the athletes in any way. There is kind of this kind of old way of thinking that's bulked a lot at that. But I think as two people that say that, I can be reasonable, but I can't necessarily always be objective. what really is kind of the beauty and just fully leaning in.
Hudak.
I said reasonable, but not fully objective.
No, come on. I come on. Not fooling me.
What's the beauty in being that way?
Well, again, I'm lucky because I grew up a Tulane fan. Okay. I just some of the stuff I've thought about, especially in the last week. I've got memories that have just been flooding back. And I was actually texting with one of my buddies today who I played baseball with up at Northeast Louisiana. Old Stan Cole lives in Bossier City. He's a second baseman. And he's like, hey, man, I was on my walk this morning. He goes, when are you going in the Hall of Fame? I'm like, tomorrow. And he goes, you know, I can't, you know, it's so well deserved. And I remember when you were calling games when we were watching the Saints and the 49ers in the dorm room on Taco Sundays. And I mean, but, you know, I think about stuff like that. And then I think about when I was a kid and all the local neighborhood kids, the old Tulane Stadium turf, Maddy, used to be out there basically where Brown Field is in front of the UC. Okay. The original Tulane Stadium AstroTurf. And we would go out there, I mean, what, 13, 14, 15 years old. We'd go out there and play pickup football games out there on the old turf. I mean, the numbers were still there, the yard lines. I mean, they had Super Bowls literally played on that turf. And that was basically where, you know, where I grew up, the uptown kids would go and play football. I mean, but that's how I grew up. I mean, it's funny. I was a Tulane fan, and none of my friends were Tulane fans. They were all LSU. And they were like, why are you a Tulane fan? Well, I mean, I grew up 5 minutes away. You know, I could have, where I grew up, I could walk to Tulane Stadium when it was, I mean, I was too young to see any games there, but it was just kind of the way I grew up. And it was, again, what we talked about in the very beginning. I mean, it was hard for me because Tulane never won. And LSU, they always won. So, but when Tulane would beat LSU back in 79, 81, 82, they beat them 3 out of 4 years. I'm in 5th grade, 6th grade. What do you think those Mondays were like for me when I would go into middle school after Tulane had beaten LSU again? Probably the greatest days of my middle school life, because Tulane never beat LSU. But yeah, and as a matter of fact, that's the last time we beat them was 1982. So, but it's just, I've been thinking about stuff like that. I mean, I hadn't thought about playing on the turf in years and years and years. And that's the type of stuff now that it's all bubbling up in me as I'm, you know, thinking about that speech I'm going to do on Friday night, which, Teddy, man, I got to hold it together. I know you're not a crier. I've cried one time on the air, and that was when we beat LSU in 2001 to go to Omaha for the first time in baseball. That's the only time I've cried on the air. I've been telling myself I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it on Friday night. I got to hold it together. I got to hold it together because there's a lot of stuff that just you think about when you spend that much time at a place. I mean, again, Maddy, and I'm going to say this, I'm not going to give away all the stuff I'm going to say, but I mean, where Turchin is right now, the baseball field, which where old Turchin was too, that where they have played Tulane baseball in that location basically since the mid 80s. Okay. Where Ullman is now used to be a track and a practice field and a soccer field. I have spent more time at the baseball spot and where Ullman is. Probably the only other place that I spent more time was the house I grew up in on Vendome. I have spent more time on that campus in those two locations than any place in my entire life. I mean, it's not even close when you really think about it. So it's just, again, what are you going to do, man? It's just, it's very heady to me. It's very heady.
It's a lot of nostalgia coming up.
Yeah,
all at once.
Totally.
Well, as much as you say that I'm not a crier, and normal life, that's correct. I've found that I've cried more watching football games than I ever have in my entire life.
Tulane games at that.
Yeah, I was going to say
not
the
losses.
Cotton Bowl post game was a little verklempt up there in the post game booth, to say the least. But I just feel like that's, for me, what I really have enjoyed, very surprisingly at that about radio. For me, it was very much a second quarter, I guess, of my life segue that I really wasn't really expecting. But I know that you, from the get-go, have always wanted to be calling games. That it was never, you know, TV or anything for you. If I'm being correct here, it's always been radio. And what about radio?
Face for radio.
Okay, well, besides the face, what else drew you towards it?
Look, this is no disrespect to all my TV peeps out there, because I got a lot of TV friends, okay? but TV's a cop-out. You don't have to do anything. The picture tells the story. It takes a little work to do radio. You got to paint a picture. And that's what I love about it. And the biggest compliments that I get from people are when they come up to me and they say, Graff, man, listening to you is really, really awesome. I feel like I'm there when I'm listening to you. And that's it. I mean, that is the highest compliment one can receive. When you bring them into a place that they cannot be. That's what it's all about to me. When you're doing TV, you're just watching. I mean, the color guy is way more important on TV than the play-by-play guy is. Way more important because the analyst has to analyze.
Yeah, he's painting the picture.
Correct. He's drawing on the telestrator, showing where the X goes and the X's and O's and all that stuff. You're just kind of along for the ride when you're doing TV play-by-play. Now, Joel Myers is outstanding at what he does as a TV play-by-play because he understands the game and he does a lot of TV play-by-play like he's on radio, which I love. And to listen to him and Antonio, they're just a great pairing for the Pelicans broadcast. But it's funny when Rick Jones came back in to have his number retired in the springtime from Tulane baseball, I went on with Jack Benjamin on the ESPN Plus broadcast, and he's asking me questions, and the game's going on, and I actually paused to wait for the pitch. And Jack's like, you can keep going. And I'm like, oh my God, I forgot. I'm on TV. I'm not on radio. Like, you can't do that on radio. Like, here's the pitch. Here's the 1-0 pitch. Here's the 2-1 pitch. On TV, you can just watch him throw the ball. And so, yeah, I realized, oh my goodness gracious, I am so freaking radio bound. It's not even funny. Now if they ask me to do something on television, I'm not going to turn it down, but obviously radio is my first love and it will always be my love just because it's all about painting pictures to your listeners.
Yeah, I've learned that in a lot of ways, just being on the sideline, even for the games where they can't really see the numbers up there, and just knowing that that's a really important part of being able to explain who's making the tackle and who's, doing this. But I found it interesting kind of asking Corey this question too, because I've just been thinking more about how in radio, I just feel like everyone has such more delegated tasks because, like you said, you are painting a picture. And if you're not looking somewhere, you don't have a television prompter going on really at the same time to show you what you missed. I didn't know that Frank Gore Jr. had thrown a pass in the Southern Miss game because I was looking at Jesus Machado lining up to blitz on one side because that's kind of where my eyes are drawn to. But I'm just kind of curious too. Like, I know it seems obvious to say that you're following the ball, but is it just a question of multitasking, or is it really the time in practice where you would recognize kind of what you were able to see from there? How do you paint a picture really in real time where everything is in the snap of seconds in football?
Yeah, well, I think, it comes with experience. I mean, towards the end of my tenure at Tulane, I thought myself I had become a pretty solid football play-by-play announcer. The first 5 years, I don't think I was very good at all. And it took, a lot of self-critique. It took a lot of people who did not know me to listen to my tapes and, and critique me. And when I would go back and listen to them, listen to my broadcasts and trying to establish what the people who were also listening to my broadcast and what I was doing wrong, I would go back and listen to these tapes and I'm like, my God, I am terrible at this. Because in football, you've got to set up the play. Okay. As the play-by-play guy, you've got to set everything up. How many receivers are there to each side? How many are there? How many tight ends are there? It's all offensive. Now, once you start to really get used to it, you can say really quickly, obviously, especially nowadays when there's so much tempo offensively, but they're showing blitz or is it a nickel package, dime package? You can start to figure all that stuff out. but really offensively is where it all begins. And it's how many running backs are there to the left or to the right of the quarterback? And here's the key, and probably the biggest criticism I got early on, and I listen to a lot of radio, Maddy, a lot of broadcasts, and a lot of present play-by-play guys still do not do this. Well, there's the snap. Sometimes it's just so-and-so back to throw, so-and-so hands off. Well, where did they snap the ball back to him? Was he under center? But Maddy, again, when I would listen to myself back in those early years, I didn't do it. And I thought, hey, I'm this big shot play-by-play guy and I'm getting everything. I don't need to. And I realized how bad. I mean, when I look back on it now, I was not good at all. It's really a miracle that I made it 12 years. But as the years went on, then you get used to it. But I'm telling you, if you're ever listening, think about it. Do they say, and whoever's quarterback, and Michael Pratt takes the snap? I'm not dissing Corey Glore. I'm just being general here. Okay. So-and-so takes the snap. So-and-so's under center, takes the snap. Think about that. And
I am actually
you got to set it. No, but that's painting the picture. That's painting the picture. That's part of it, at least to me, but you got to set up everything offensively. And then, yes, it's Steve Barrios's job to see what the offensive linemen are doing, who's blocking downfield. If there's a wide out, like say last week after Barnes had that run down the right sideline, who was downfield blocking for him, because you're looking at Barnes. Exactly. Shout out. But you're looking at Barnes and you're saying midfield, 40, 30, that's what you're doing as the play-by-play guy. And then as you kind of back off on it, then you can say, well, so-and-so's blocking downfield, but I mean, you really don't have enough time to do that. But Corey Glore can do that because he's very quick-mouthed, if you will.
It's kind of put things in perspective.
Does that make sense?
No, it does.
Sense? Okay.
It does, because the first football book I read was Take Your Eye Off the Ball to understand the game of football, but it is the complete antithesis of that.
But they're not calling the game.
Exactly. But like you said, you can kind of put your eyes all over the place on TV. And then sometimes it's, I missed when the ball was thrown. Well, that's a very big problem if you're calling the radio game. And so, do you ever find yourself kind of switching into that view when has it changed the way that you watch games on TV, or does it really just kind of go into this portal of what? Because I kind of feel that way on the sideline where sometimes I don't even really remember what just happened because my brain was looking at it from a completely different way.
It makes sense. No, I when I'm watching a game on TV as a fan, I pretty much switch off. I did it for so long. I want to be able to enjoy it as a fan. Basketball is a little bit different for me, especially kind of going into the season, like I am now. I mean, my life as I know it on Monday ends when Pelicans Media Day kicks in. But you just kind of get back into it. There's always a hesitation because, I haven't called a basketball game since April. And our first preseason game, Maddy, is in 12 days, if you can believe it. Yeah. It's crazy. It's like, do I remember how to call a basketball game? Am I going to know what to do? And actually, when they start training camp next week, when we're pretty lucky we get to watch training camp, I will start calling games sitting from the bleachers. I will start picking spots out and just kind of get into it. The best part about doing the NBA, well, it's not the best part, but a really good part about doing the NBA, Maddy, is there's a preseason and you can kind of get into it. We have 5 preseason games. So by the time the regular season starts, I've got a little flow back in me. That's tough about doing college. And I talked to Corey about that. And look, when football starts, that's it. There's not a preseason game where you can kind of warm up. I mean, the South Alabama game for you guys, that was it. I mean, you got to be on quickly. Same thing for basketball, and it's the same thing for baseball. There's no kind of warm-ups. You're just going right into it. So, did I answer your question? I don't know. Did I?
I think so.
I'm just rambling.
No, but it's just, again, I enjoy discussing just kind of these different perspectives of it. Like you said, it changes in basketball, it changes in football.
Oh, about watching TV. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I watch as a fan. I'm not saying, all right, split backfield. I'm not thinking all that to myself. I just want my team to win.
Fair enough.
No,
it's a good point about the no preseason, though. I will never forget the first time Corey came against Morgan State down to the sideline. All of a sudden, my brain was like, oh my God, I'm live. What do I say? And it does. It's like you don't remember how to speak in radio. Like Corey always says, put your radio voice on. And it seems like kind of a joke, but it's not. There really is almost this just portal that you go into. But how do you really kind of prepare for that first game of the season? We would do some scrimmages. This might sound dumb, but would you literally talk to yourself in the backyard or something? Because I did that before. What was kind of your first, do you remember going into your first game, calling it as the play-by-play announcer? And how did you try to kind of prep for it in any way?
The first play-by-play that I ever did, and again, I don't want to give too much away my speech tomorrow or Friday. I know I'm trying to timestamp this thing here, Maddy. But in 1991, in the summer of 1991, me and Gordon Rivette went to Johnstown, Pennsylvania for the AAABA baseball tournament. The New Orleans Boosters, who they travel up to Johnstown. It's basically a college, senior year of high school, first year of college age team. And they go up to Johnstown every year and compete in the AAABA baseball tournament. Well, Gordon Rivette and I sold advertising and to make the trip to go up to do these games on the radio. I'd never done any type of baseball on the radio before. And we sold the advertising. We got sponsors. We went up with the team and they actually won the national championship. And we've spent a week up in Johnstown, PA. And I know, Maddy, you've spent a few summers here. What going up north during August would be
anywhere.
Like? Anywhere but here. I mean, what a week that was. And I was like, man, this is fun. My God, I've got a headset on and I'm talking about baseball, and I played baseball my whole life and I can actually do it. I know what I'm talking about. So that's really where it started. And, I've told the story about Ken Berthelot, and you mentioned it early on. I actually had a little, even though I'd never met Ken, I had confidence in myself. I mean, I didn't know he was going to ask me to sit in with him, 4 days later, but I had confidence in me knowing that I knew the game of baseball. And I could talk about the game of baseball. And little did I know. I mean, the other two sports, I kind of just, it's not rocket science. It's not easy, but it's not hard. I mean, you got to know what you're doing. I don't know X's and O's in football like you do. I've kind of gradually learned the game of basketball. Again, I'm not a savant by any stretch of the imagination, but I know the games. Okay. I've watched enough of them. So doing the other two sports, it came naturally to me. The first football game I ever called was back in 2003. I was on the sideline, just like you. We were playing Louisville in the Superdome. And about 2 hours before kickoff, our play-by-play guy back then, Sean Kelly, who's now voice of the Florida Gators, former voice of the Green Wave, he wasn't there. And I'm down on the sideline, and we're like, where the hell is Sean? I mean, we're going on in an hour, and our play-by-play guy isn't here. Where is he? Well, he showed up. I mean, I'll tell you after the fact what happened, but he gets in, he puts the headsets on, he goes, "Hey man, I'm not feeling very well. You're probably going to have to come up here and do this." And I'm like, okay. Now again, I had a lot of baseball experience calling games. I had never done a football game, not one. And I went up. Well, he had kidney stones. We found out after the fact. He had to go to the hospital. So I literally came up from the sideline, put the headset on, Steve to my left, Alden to my right, and called the Tulane Louisville football game. It was the last game of the 2003 season, which is really crazy because that game was moved from September because of a what? What do you think? A hurricane. Exactly. So if the hurricane would not have moved that game back, I never would have done that game. Like, it wouldn't have happened. The only reason we played in December was because of a hurricane. So that was my first experience calling a football game at Tulane. And I did okay. I mean, I guess. I mean, I got through it. I didn't panic. I didn't freak out. I mean, I had a lot of experience doing play-by-play, just not football. But again, it ain't rocket science. You know the game. Someone's throwing the football. I knew the players on the team. So,
I mean, sure, fair enough.
I got through it.
Hell of an answer for what was your first game. Oh, it was with complete.
That was my first football game.
Right.
Not on the sideline.
Right.
Yes.
But just because, I mean, what you said to Ken about baseball, very similar to my conversation with Corey, where I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I can talk football until the cows come home. But stepping in like that, I mean, that is, well, like you said, you can't panic in broadcasting. And that's kind of similar to when every single one of our post-game interviews was dropping last week. You just kind of have to roll through the dead air sometimes.
Well, that's why, no, I mean, and that's why just every game you do, Maddy, it's an experience. You're going to get to the point, and you're getting there, but you're going to get to the point where nothing's going to phase you, just because ish happens, as you well know, and there's nothing you can do to control it. So look, I'm like, when it comes to broadcasts, and I know your play-by-play guy is too, when there's stuff happening that's out of your control and you want to control it, it drives you absolutely crazy. But sometimes there's really nothing you can do about it.
Sometimes you just got to roll with it. Roll with wave.
A wave. Yeah.
Well, just to kind of segue this into, like you said before, of how you watch games completely differently when you're not calling them, you're just a fan and you want the team to win. Well, last season for you, after all of the years that we just discussed of the good, the bad, and the ugly of Tulane football, how did that just feel like for you?
Well, a lot of people have asked me in the last, 12 months or so, did you miss not being there? Did you miss, and I think I'd be lying and saying that I didn't miss it a little bit. But not as much as you would think. It would have been awesome to have been on those trips, Maddy, going to Kansas State and Houston. Look, I love winning on the road more than at home. I just think it's a total bonding experience when you're on the plane with the players and the coaches and the staff. I mean, you're all in it together. And, I know I texted you. I was like, that plane ride coming home from Manhattan, Kansas must have been just one of the great experiences that you could possibly have, because Tulane just doesn't go on the road and win games like that, but
that was our first plane ride as a broadcast crew with a win.
And it's just so satisfying because you want the team to win, but you also know that your broadcast more than likely kicked ass because of the way the game played out, So it's a total feeling of exhilaration and some relief. But getting back to the original question, I think I just would miss stuff like that, being on the plane, coming back, being with Steve and Gus was the sideline, reporter back when I was still doing play-by-play, Gus Kattengell, and just to talk about the games. That's the stuff you really miss. I mean, I just thought it was awesome being at Yeoman Stadium and watching games from the party deck. I mean, where the team comes out. What a great seat that is. Being able to watch games on TV. I mean, I was in a Tulane broadcast booth from 1993 to 2018. I missed a couple of games here and there because I was the Hornets studio host back then. So I'd miss a couple of games. I was doing sideline back then. But I'd say from 93 to 2018, I missed about 6 football games, 6 or 7, under 10. And that's home and away. So I was at all of them, 1 and 10, 2 and 9, 4 and whatever, I was at every one of them. So it was kind of cool for me it's like, I've never watched a Tulane game on television. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
I didn't know what it was like to watch a Tulane game on TV ever because I was there. So I like that experience as well. Now, deep down, I kind of really wish I was at the Cotton Bowl because that was a whole different type of deal. But, I watched Zion hurt his hamstring that night. What can you say?
I unfortunately will always think about you. Not unfortunately, but you are seared in the Cotton Bowl memory as being in my favorite place, Philadelphia, while the Zion hamstring news comes out.
I had
sacrifices.
Maddy had 3 hours of complete and utter bliss, and then it ended. And then after the Pels game was over, because I didn't look at my phone, because once it had all died down, the Pels game tipped off. And when the Pels game ended and everything, I looked at my phone and I had, this is pales in comparison to your unread messages, but I had about 100.
I answered all of them ever.
I had 100. Yeah. Unbelievable. I had 175 text messages on my phone, and they were all about Tulane, all of them. And I'm like, man, this is going to take me a while to get through them. But yeah, because all these people who texted me knew what I had gone through my entire life. And it's like, how awesome was that? I'm like, well, I was in a hotel room, and then I was on a bus. And then when Ballman caught the touchdown, I'm going crazy. And I'm in the Wells Fargo Center, in the bowels of the Wells Fargo Center, where the media checks in. And I'm literally screaming my head off. And there's security guys going, what in the hell is this guy? Because they could give a rat's what about college football in Philadelphia. And I'm going nuts. I mean, nuts. And that was my Cotton Bowl experience. And you guys are, Glore's losing his voice. Barrios is losing his voice. You're crying. And I was in the media check-in at the Wells Fargo Center in South Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That was my Cotton Bowl experience at the end.
All goes back to just blaming it all on Pennsylvania at the end of the day. But
schedule makers.
The thing that has just, again, surprised me the most really was this last weekend's turnout. I don't want to be disrespectful, because I think Nichols really came out and played a hell of a 4-quarter game, but just knowing the years of Tulane fandom, and even last year it felt like it was pulling teeth. Tajay is up there saying TulaneTix.com, it'd be really cool for fans in the stands when I score a touchdown. And that's what's really been the most impressive thing to me this year, has been the student section turnout. The fact that I have people from my sorority texting me that their, fiancés bought them tickets. It's a present now to go to a Tulane football game. And that, I think, I know it's not the same as last year, but just to see how it's really taken an effect on the home environment, to me, has been such a pleasant pleasure.
It's been awesome. And again, kudos to you, because you don't have to rip your rotator cuff anymore trying to get people to go, to get up. I think it started to turn at the Memphis game last year, which was homecoming, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I think that's when it really started to inch in the direction of,
that was the one Tajay begged people to show up for, and they did.
Yeah. So everybody showed up. Being up 35-0 at halftime didn't hurt.
Well,
I remember
it hurt that they left because they thought it was over.
Well, I mean,
we've learned.
Yes, it's never over. You should know that. I remember walking through the Glazer Club at halftime in complete and utter disbelief. First of all, it was packed to the gills. Students packed it out in the first, it was a day game. And I'm going up to people and I'm like, are we really beating Memphis 35-0 at half? Like, is this even real? This can't be real. It's like, no, this is happening. And then really from that game on, Yeoman was never a place where you could say, all right, we're going into Yeoman. We've got a major home field advantage. It was never really like that. And I was there from day one at Yeoman. Now, we won some games there, but it wasn't a place where you would think that, all right, we're going to win today, and our environment is going to have a lot to do with it. Okay. I just think from that Memphis game on to where we are now, I think Yeoman has become a true home field advantage. And look, I know you were there as a student in the UConn game where you literally could have shot a cannon into the student section and not hit anybody.
You would have hit me
ever.
And two others.
Yeah, in the monsoon. One of the great moments, just knowing that Gus Kattengill was getting drenched on the other sideline while I was in the booth, literally with my window almost closed, trying to look through it to call the game. But I digress. You know what the cool part is, though, Maddy? And I was thinking about this when I was walking to the game, when I was walking to the Nichols game last Saturday. To see now, and I never thought it would happen, and I'm so glad it's happening, to see the kids, Maddy, the 10-year-olds, the 12-year-olds, the 6 and 7-year-olds going to the game wearing Tulane stuff.
That's a great point.
That to me is the greatest part about all of this, because we lost so many generations of Tulane fans when we were terrible for all of those years. Nobody cared. Nobody cared. And your fandom starts when you're a kid. You root for the team when you're 8, 9, 10 years old. You pick a team, and that's your team for the rest of your life. Now, fortunately and unfortunately, I had the Saints and Tulane to grow up with. So now we've had our moments, but there's been a lot more down than up. Now, the 2006 Saints fans, they've seen a lot of up. Well, I was there in the 80s and the 90s and, the early 80s. So I've seen the grand scope of things. But Maddy, I saw so many kids wearing Tulane stuff walking into that game on Saturday against Nichols. And I'm thinking to myself, man, this is great, because the parents are bringing these kids now to Yeoman Stadium. It's a great place to watch a football game. Oh, by the way, the team is good. And now you've got something to latch on for the rest of your life. Tulane is making new fans every single day that are going to last for the rest of their life. And to me, just having been in it, I never thought that was going to happen. And now it's happening. And it's awesome. It really, really is. That, again, another long-winded answer, but that to me is, I think, the best part about all of this is Tulane's getting a new generation of fans, which we had not had in a long time.
All right, Graff, is there anything that we haven't gone over? I don't want to give away your speech too much.
Yeah, I talk about a couple of the gut punches and some of the great moments. One game I did not talk about in my speech, because again, I tried to streamline it because I've been out in the audience and I know I've got a lot to say though. So It's going to be a little bit. It's not going to be to the point where people are going to go, can you please? I've got it all scripted out. I'm not going to go on any type of ramble rant. It's all done. But I got enough stories and everything. But the longest plane ride of my life, Maddy, was after the 2007 Army game. It was a night game at West Point, which was one thing. Okay. And then, that was my first year doing play-by-play. And we had a 10-point lead with 4 minutes left against a team who didn't throw the ball. I mean, Army ran the triple option. You're thinking, all right, we're going to win this game. Matt Forte's senior year. And Army goes and kicks a field goal. We get it back. We don't get the first down. Shocker. We punt it away. And what happens on the last play of regulation? A Hail Mary. It is now called the Mikey Miracle. They throw it up from the 40-yard line. Our guys tip it up on the goal line. It goes to the back of the end zone. And Maddy, I'm telling you, the dude who caught it for Army, and I can't think of his name offhand, is literally parallel to the ground, reaching out like this, out of bounds, and his foot hits the very back of the end zone, pointed down like it was a ballerina. He caught it parallel to the ground, and he put his foot down. And I'll never forget this because I got on Barrios big time. Barrios in that call, and I listened to the call, the week after. Barrios and I were roommates back then on the road. And I'm going, ball tipped, and it's caught. And Steve's going, no. And I'm like, Steve, you can't do that. I'm trying to call the game. You can't. And I was right along with him because I'm like, there's no way in hell that is going to be complete. And you look at the replay and you're like, my God, they could have done that 100. They could have practiced it
right
100 times and it never would have happened. So anyway, they tied it up on the last play. We go to overtime. They kick a field goal. We actually held them to a field goal. We get it in overtime. We're going into the same end zone. It's 3rd and 1. We give it to Matt Forte, who ran for 2,130 yards that year. We're on the 15-yard line in overtime. We give it to Forte. They stop him, even though he wasn't stopped. The referee screwed us on the spot because he got the first down. And we got to kick a field goal, and we missed the field goal. I will hold the name of the field goal kicker.
It's the worst job in football.
I'm not going to say who it was. He knows who he is. He's out there. But we missed the field goal and lost in overtime on a game that was on national TV. And then, so we're in West Point, New York, and it's 10 o'clock.
That's a flight. Yeah.
Night. So it's an hour post game, as you well know, another hour to the airport. And then it's a 3.5-hour flight home minimum. And I just remember, and I think Barrios would actually tell you the exact same story, that was the longest plane ride of his life too. Because it was for me. It's like, how in the hell did we just lose that game? It's just like, so I didn't want to tell that story on such a glorious occasion.
So you saved it for my show.
Yeah. So that's a story, but I'm telling you, Barrios would tell you that probably to me, and I've seen a lot of them. That to me was probably the most bitter defeat. I think that would be almost like for you for that homecoming, that Tulsa game 2 years ago, the homecoming game.
My 5-year homecoming as an alumni. Yes, it was
a
little personal. Needed some help from Steve to get through that post game.
The only difference was you didn't have to get on a plane and fly home after it and land at 3 a.m. So
had a lot of those 2021 year, but certainly not, like you said, not fashion. But I think that nothing else sums up just truly how much you have earned the accolades that you will be getting on Friday. And I'm just happy that I will be there to watch you do it as the person that helped me get into this role and be asking you these questions right now.
Who'd have thunk it, huh? Who'd have thunk it? Yep. Just great that you're going to be there. It's going to be an awesome night. All my brothers are going to be here. My mom. It's very, very difficult when all 6 of us get together. So, I mean, you could probably count on one hand the amount of times we've all been together in the last 10 years. It's just really, really difficult because of schedules. So just to have all of my brothers there, my best friends are coming in from out of town. It's going to be, I'm talking to one of them earlier today, actually. He's just like, Graff, we can't wait. It's just going to be it's a celebration of what you've done. And I never thought about it that way, but it's true. I mean, it's just going to be a really, really fun weekend, and I can't wait to experience it with everybody.
All right, y'all. I hope you enjoyed that interview. Again, that was Todd Graffagnini, current voice of the Pelicans, was the former voice of the Green Wave. He went through all the specific years at the beginning. I think it was overall 27 between baseball, basketball, and football, and is one of the 2023 Hall of Fame inductees for Tulane's class this year. Again, with that celebration taking place tomorrow, one that I'm very grateful to be a part of, because as much as the things that I just mentioned alongside of all of those accolades for Todd, he's also been my mentor in this industry and is the person that I have to thank for being on the sideline at Tulane today. And so just to be able to have the opportunity to see all of that come, not necessarily full circle in terms of our relationship, but just to, again, see what he's been able to accomplish, all of the work that he's put in, and show that, again, emotions do pay off a lot of the time. As much as we are kind of different people in our daily temperament, we both get very, very into sports, and at least from the football perspective. And again, I just feel like there's been this wave of objective coverage, but if you ask me, especially when it comes to radio, I think just the emotion really tells it all. And I just have so much enjoyed talking again with fellow people that work in the same crew that I do. I know I haven't worked with Todd in that capacity, but I enjoy talking to Corey Glore, the current voice of the Green Wave, a few weeks back on this show, just again about how he watches broadcasts. And I hope it really illuminated for people how much a team really has to work in concert. And by that, I mean broadcast team, in order for things to go off. Like I said, I'm not the play-by-play announcer, but if I was, I would have really screwed up that Southern misplay where Frank Gore threw a pass, because at least from what I was looking at, I'm a defense person, and I was looking at Jesus Machado and the linebackers lining up for a blitz, getting ready to kind of have that in my report. And so it just goes to show you, again, all the different things that a broadcast crew does to try to paint a picture. And I will say that I definitely feel that I have a unique arm on our current broadcast crew in a way that I don't feel sideline reporters typically have, just the amount of times that Corey and Steve come down to be on the sideline, what they trust me to do and say with my coverage, and feel like I'm giving real football analysis. But it's hard to say that I wouldn't have had the confidence to feel like that was something I could do without how much Todd really believed in me and got me to the position to be on radio the year that I moved down here, host the Sports Hangover with Gus Cattengale, and host a couple of shows myself at that, to be in a position to, when I eventually talked to Corey Glore, another thing that Todd set up, to say, like I said on the interview, I don't have specific experience here. I can talk football till the cows come home. And at least now I've done quite a bit of it on radio. All of that to say, mentors in this industry are just beyond important. And when they tell you things, I would just recommend that you listen, because one of the things that Todd has always been saying to me since I met him in 2020 was the importance of reps. We talked about reps again when it comes to doing your broadcast and the fact that we don't have a preseason. But for all these people that always ask me, what did I do to get to this position? If I could ask me for any advice, my answer would be any reps you can. The shows that I was doing on radio, football wasn't happening. I was breaking down a lot of basketball finals and just stuff that I'm not typically used to covering. But I just having the ability to say, yes, I've hosted a 3-hour show by myself. I've co-hosted quite a few now. I know how to talk on air, and I know I have some musical theater and acting experience as a child, if you will, which did help me, learn how to speak on camera, which is a little irrelevant here, but just to show that all the little things matter. And I'm grateful that Todd has been one of those people to show those little things along the way. So again, this was kind of, I've been doing a lot of opponent previews, but it just felt right again with the Hall of Fame inductee class at that happening this Saturday against UAB, where Tulane kicks off conference play this weekend at Yeoman Stadium with kickoff at 11. And we're back again on 104.1 The Spot with pregame coverage starting at 10 o'clock. It really just felt right to bring again that all full circle, and just to say again that I am just so grateful to be a part of this ride. And so that post-game breakdown will be coming up for you guys next Tuesday. Otherwise, Tulane's on a bye, and I will see you guys then.